Thank you for joining. We'll get started in just one moment. Thank you for joining today's web briefing, where we'll discuss key findings from the 2019 Global Phish Report put together by Avanan. You can download the slides right now at the website on your screen. There'll also be a recording available afterwards. So let's get a couple of the housekeeping items out of the way. There's a Q&A feature on the right side of your screen. You could click that now. And you could submit questions at any time during the course of this webinar. We'll take those questions and continue to answer them in process as we go through the webinar and do a formal Q&A session at the end. Now, the slides are available, as I said already. The recording will be available via an email shortly after the web briefing. And of course, you can sign up for reports, updates, and to learn more about attack briefs at the avanan.com website. My name is Michael Hiskey. I'm your host today. I'm Avanan's Chief Marketing Officer. I come from a background in data analytics, cloud, and security. I've been an author in Forbes and Information World. You may have seen some of that stuff. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Avanan's co-founder, Michael Landaway.
Thanks, Michael. Again, I'm Michael Landaway. I started my career at NASA Ames in the heart of Silicon Valley over 20 years ago. A number of security startups, most recently Forescout, and then as co-founder of Avanan. Primarily doing research, but probably most interestingly, strategy.
So here's a little overview of some of the things we're going to talk about today. So we're going to go above and beyond the discussion that was started in the Global Phish Report, adding a few more details on results and trends and what to look for in how to address email security. So we'll go through some of the numbers, how much that costs organizations today, what some of the attack trends are, both in and around the Global Phish Report, and then talk a little bit about the road ahead and how we're combating that problem. First, I'd like to start with a poll, if I may. So we'll queue up the first poll. So our first polling question is with regard to the drawing for the Gartner Summit today. So as you know, one lucky participant that is an attendee of our web briefing today will be able to get a free complimentary full pass. Now, this is the full $3,700 pass for the Gartner Risk and Security Summit that's happening in National Harbor, Maryland next month. So you could answer these questions any way you like. So have you been to an event in the past, or have you never been to an event? Are you not planning to attend, but you're a Gartner client? Or do you just want to are you not interested in being a part of the drawing? Please answer now. At the same time, so using the feature on your webinar screen, you could raise your hand. So I'd like everyone who's interested in participating in the drawing for the full complimentary pass to the Gartner Summit to raise your hand, which you could do in the participant screen on your side. So a lot of you have never been to a Gartner event before, almost 60% of you. That's interesting. So I'm very excited that one lucky participant that sticks on through the end of the Q&A will be able to get that complimentary pass to the event. Okay, so from there, we're going to talk a little bit more. Michael's going to give us a little bit more detail on the research that went into the Global Phish Report.
So at a high level, we learned one key thing. Of all of the email that is being sent to your inbox, 1 in 99 emails is a phishing attack. We analyzed over 55 million emails from enterprises using either Office 365 or G Suite. So those emails, whether they entered the inbox or entered the junk mail folder, were analyzed both by tools that we use and third-party tools in order to separate those from legitimate emails from phishing. In the high level, 1 in 99 emails is a phishing attack. Why is this a concern? While you might hear horror stories, see news reports, this is the key point. It may only take seconds or minutes for a business to be compromised, for a breach to happen, but it could take months, or even years for that breach to be discovered. The attack can happen in a click.
This information that we've added here is from the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report. There's a ton of interesting information in that report, and we've tried to use some of that data to augment the detail that we've looked at. So our analysis looked at 561,000 phishing attacks across those millions of emails and was conducted primarily through Q4 of last year, looking across all industries and organizations as small as 20 or 30 users on up to hundreds of thousands of users. And the effects of phishing are actually quite dear to the organizations.
So at a high level, we learned that 1 in 99 emails are a phishing attack. What does that mean at the other end of the spectrum? First thing we found was that 30% of those malicious emails actually make it through the Office 365 or Gmail filters and make it into the inbox. Once it's in the inbox, we see, this is data from PhishMe, who studies such things, tests enterprise users from companies of all sizes, that if a phishing attack is in the inbox, 7.3% of users will actually click on that email. Now, that's on average. They found that it could be as high as 20, 30, or even 40% of users in a large enterprise might click on an email. And even after extensive training, that number might be as low as 3-4%, but it's not zero. Someone is going to click on a phishing attack if it makes it to the inbox. And then in just minutes or seconds, whatever payload that email caught leads to a breach. One breach can cost as much as 1.6 million. And according to Deloitte, a consumer review, if that breach comes out, it could actually cause you to lose customers. So one simple email can make it through your inbox and cause real damage to your organization. So that's what we learned at a high level. Let's start digging into some of the results that we can find in the report. So 1 in 99 emails is a phishing attack. 98 are clean, 1 of those is malicious. But now let's just look at those phishing emails. Just looking at emails that are proven to be an attack, out of every 100 phishing emails, 20% of them are actually marked as phishing, seen by the inbox, seen by the email filter as a malicious attack and put into your junk folder. Some of these attacks are actually not seen as threatening and only marked as spam, but fortunately pushed into your junk inbox so that your users don't have access, typically. We do know that users might actually scroll through those looking for a lost email. And so even though phishing attacks are attacks marked as spam, might actually be clicked on. The greatest concern, though, are those malicious emails, those phishing attacks that enter the inbox in 1 of 2 ways. One, they're actually marked as clean, seen by your filters as a perfectly legitimate email and make it into the inbox. Chances are your users are going to click on it. And the fourth category, and it's a category that you may not have taken the time to think about, but is of even greater concern. Over 5% of those malicious emails enter the inbox, not because they were missed by the filter, it's because they bypassed the filter. They were actually whitelisted and went directly to the inbox. So at a high level, we can see that at least 30% of emails, malicious emails, will make it to the inbox. How do they get there? This is true in either Office 365 or G Suite, but let's dig into what the email filters see. Office 365's online protection originated out of their spam filters. Every email is assigned a confidence level, a spam confidence level that tells you whether it's a legitimate email or a spam. In addition, Office 365 adds another score, a phishing confidence level. And if it's high, 9, it's probably phishing. If it's above 3, it will actually end up in the junk email folder. What we're concerned about are the other categories, those that have a very large confidence level or a very small confidence level, or have a -1 confidence level, basically meaning it was never scanned by the filter at all. It was whitelisted and went directly to the inbox.
Now, we're picking on Microsoft here a little bit because the data is a little more interesting, right? So there's clearly more attacks that hit Office 365 versus G Suite. You can find a lot more detail from our previous web briefing where we actually dug more deeply into the security profile differences between Office 365 and Google's G Suite. You can find all that detail on our website, and there's a link right under the button here to the right. Now, before we dig deeper, I'm going to launch another poll. So this poll is about what your organization does with respect to protecting yourself from email phishing. So some people do a subject change in the header, right? So every email subject line will say this is an external email, and that might be your vote. Some people make a change to the body where there's a disclaimer at the end of every email. I've seen that one, that's quite popular. Some of you might have a help desk staff or use multi-factor authentication, and you could vote for more than one of these depending upon what your organization does. Desktop applications, so some people have a button that sits within their email client. I can click the button and report a suspicious email that way, or perhaps you know your organization is using some sort of a web gateway or a mail transaction agent of some sort for that, or maybe something else entirely. I'm interested to see the results.
So this poll pretty much assumes that phishing attacks are making it into the inbox, and there are a variety of ways to handle that result. So again, making the assumption that an email box is compromised with a phishing attack, we have a range of answers here about how you react to them.
So I see, it's incredible to see the range. So a lot of people are doing the email subject change, not surprising. Help desk staff, it seems like an expensive way to address the problem, or something else entirely. So I'll be interested to hear during the question and answer session, people talk more about what they're doing in specific to address those challenges.
Now, all of these are really great results. It looks like you're doing a variety of things. Some of them are free, like multi-factor authentication. Some are expensive, but definitely worthwhile because it is a serious concern. But it's good to see that there are a variety of tools at hand. So now we've talked about a high level that phishing attacks are reaching your inbox. What I'd like to do is talk about the different types that we discovered. You'll see them here. They've broken down into roughly 4 categories. In reverse order, probably the most popular is malware phishing. It's been with us for years. It is still a serious concern, but a growing percentage are credential harvesting, those that are not out to attack your desktop with a piece of malware, but trying to capture your credentials, most likely of a cloud service. Again, there are phishing attacks that are trying to extort money from you, but the smallest, however, the most serious of these attack types is actually spear phishing. Less than 1% are spear phishing attacks. Because they are so targeted, they are actually more serious than some of the more spam-like attacks.
Great, let's look at those in some more detail.
So starting with what we're all familiar with, those phishing attacks that have some sort of malicious payload. These attacks have at their target your desktop, your phone, your endpoint device, hoping that you'll click on something that will install some sort of malicious software on the endpoint. Now, there are two different ways that can be done. One is actually to have the piece of malware attached to the document, maybe disguised as an invoice so that you click on it. The email is usually designed to convince you to trust it and to open it. But it's also possible that may not be an attachment at all. It may actually be a link to a file that's hosted in the cloud so that it has the same result. You click on it, it downloads a piece of malware and infects your desktop. Now, this has been a threat that's been with us for decades, but they're still evading our security. A few ways they're doing that are, one, zero-day malware. We're still seeing custom malware individually created for each individual victim so that it may never have been seen before by the Gmail or Office 365 filters, making it into your inbox. More malicious, though, are those payloads that not only have some sort of malware to end up on your desktop, but they have additional code designed to do one thing, and that is to evade the email filter. So additional code that, for example, Microsoft has a sandboxing capability, but that malware may understand that it is in that sandbox, realize it's in the sandbox, and take no action so that it's deemed to be benign and make it into your in folder. Those links that might be downloading malicious files used to be hosted on shady sites scattered all over the internet. But what we're seeing more often now are malicious files stored in a trusted share file. So in Box, in OneDrive, in Google Drive, either in your corporate share or in the corporate share of someone you trust. The key thing being that that is a link that will bypass all filters because the OneDrive will be a trusted source.
Now, the change here is that the file itself doesn't have malicious code in it. Is that right, Michael? But it actually calls home and gets some other code that acts within that environment.
Exactly. So it's very possible one way it can be evasive is to actually not contain code originally, but when you click on it, download it later. Because in each case, it's finding a way to bypass the filters you have in place. So the next level of attack is the credential harvesting. No malware, nothing. The target is not your desktop. The target is now your credentials, your account. And most likely we found to be your Microsoft account. But it could be any number. This is an attack that's on the rise. In fact, we predict that next year it may actually be the leading type of attack. But in this case, over 41% of email phishing attacks featured some sort of credential harvesting. And you're probably all familiar with it in that you receive an email that convinces you to click on a link. That link is going to look as real as possible. And because you log into your Microsoft every single day, you may be focused on the login screen, but completely miss the malicious site that you've actually logged into. Once somebody has your Microsoft credentials, they have access to your email, you have access to your files, and then access to pretty much every other service that you may use because your inbox is the pathway to other accounts.
And this is interesting, isn't it, though, Michael, because it moves the attack from the smart people working in the security office to anyone in the organization. So it moves it to the endpoints. When I'm targeting Flo in accounting because she has great admin privileges, it makes it much easier for the hackers. They don't have to be quite as smart.
Exactly. All of these attacks are designed to fool people, not because they're not well trained, not because they are bright, it's because they are busy. They take advantage of the fact that you're distracted. They take advantage of the fact that you probably get thousands of emails a day, and all they want you to do is click on one of them. So the next category of attack are the attacks that are not out your credentials, not out for your desktop, but they are strictly out for money. What's happened in the last couple of years is they've become much, much more sophisticated. You'll see here in this example someone has sent an email claiming to have the end user's password. A couple key things here. One, the text of the email includes the target's email address. It's very possible that email comes from someone they know, someone they trust. In fact, it could actually come from their own email account, which proves that the person has their credentials. In this case, it even shows the user's password right into the text of the email. Seeing your own password in clear text is a very convincing argument, but it's very possible that they don't have it. It's very possible that it's an old password, but they have it because now on the dark web, you can buy literally billions of passwords from people all over the world from any type of account. And this is a very common attack. This is a common attack that actually should have been caught by most filters. What surprised us was actually not the form of the attack, but the methodology that the attack took to get into the inbox. We uncovered different methodologies all the time. Here's an example of one in which the attacker replaced or text within the original email with what are called zero-width spaces. These are characters that are invisible to the user, but not invisible to Microsoft's filters. So what you see here is how it appears to Microsoft. So that natural language filter that would normally see this as phishing or at least spam is completely blinded. So we see a lot of these attacks, and the reason why these very, very old attacks that had gone away for years are making their way back is because the attackers are finding pinhole methods to get through Microsoft's and G Suite's filters.
And this really comes around full circle. So we've all seen these high profile attacks from major retailers and major online sites where millions and millions of personal credentials are taken. We often wonder where those go. Well, the hackers are aging those like fine wine because they know if you didn't change your password right away, you probably haven't changed it 2 or 3 years from now, even if you were notified at the time. They're using those aged passwords in cases like this to really scare the bejesus out of you.
So this brings us to the last category of attack. And while it's less than 1% of the emails that we saw, it's probably the most serious of attacks. All the previous methods were spam type, large mass types of attacks, very impersonal attacks, even though they might be customized in an automated way. Spear phishing attacks are like a sniper, targeted for a particular individual and have the added notoriety of actually having a human at the other end. If you reply to this email, if you call the number that might be mentioned, you'll actually now be in conversation with a human. While only 0.4% of email phishing attacks might be the spear phishing type, and while only 1 in 1,000 might actually answer, these are the most expensive because typically if you've bridged that gap in just that instant to believe that this is your boss or someone with authority, you might be tempted, and it's been shown that people have sent hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars through these business email compromise.
Yeah, and furthering on the business email compromise, these are people who have used advanced social engineering to really understand maybe details about what your organization is doing. So we've seen cases where seemingly CEO emails someone in accounting for a totally plausible money transfer. Please send $10,000 to this account that might relate to an actual transaction the business is going through. And it could be quite believable, and catching people off guard is what the hackers are all about. So this is an interesting area that we expect will get more press and will be on the rise over the next year.
So we've covered those 4 categories of different phishing vectors, but now I'd like to talk about kind of the different ways they reach the inbox. A couple of the categories that are probably the most interesting. And after we published this report, most of the questions, most of the response we got back was about emails that made it into the inbox via whitelist. How is that possible? How can that happen? There are a number of ways. You may not even know that you have a whitelist because there are whitelists generated by your provider that will allow emails to bypass internal security. The most common are those links to other services. So if you get an invite from Teams or a folder within OneDrive or an email from someone else in the organization, it's very possible that that goes straight to the inbox, because by design, Google and Microsoft trust their own services. Those emails might be generated by somebody else in your organization, or might be generated by Microsoft or Google themselves and go straight to the inbox. But it's possible for a malicious person to trigger those emails, for example, by posting a malicious file in a trusted location, sending you an invite, that invite generated by Google, and because it comes from Google, you trust enough to click on it. Other types of whitelists are those that are actually generated by you, by your users, many times to keep things out of the junk mail folder. So you're missing an email, you look in the junk mail folder and you say, I don't want that to happen again, so now I'm going to whitelist all of Amazon or all of PayPal. But once you add things to that list, it's very few people that might actually revisit and check it. No list I've ever seen has been documented, so things appear on the list, no one knows why, no one deletes them. There are a few best practices when it comes to managing whitelists, but the first best practice is to not have one, or to make it as short as possible. Be careful about whitelisting your domain, but most importantly, don't whitelist names of common spam attacks. So you might need to suffer an occasional email in junk folder, but because a lot of attacks come from those domains, you do not want to trust them arbitrarily.
And our research team did this analysis, and it led them to think further about that. So there was a lot of information that we uncovered in this whitelisting example that is part of our normal attack brief research. So you'll see here a link to avanan.com/attacks, where we log a lot of that detail. This is one example that used those pinhole vulnerabilities in email filters to do another one of those things that obfuscates what you can see as the human reader versus what the machine sees as it scans the content of the email.
So I mentioned before the hesitation to whitelist name brands, but when we did this analysis last fall, we saw the most common types of attacks coming from Amazon, from shipping companies, taking advantage of the holiday time to fool you into clicking either on a sale or a tracking number. But in the non-holiday season, the most common types of attacks come from emails that look like a bank. And in the last couple of years, the leader in brand name impersonation has been Microsoft for a couple of reasons. One, chances are you trust Microsoft, you use Microsoft every day, you're used to seeing Microsoft pages. If you get an email from Bank of America, but you use Chase, you're immediately suspicious. But odds are, even if you are a G Suite user, you are interacting with Microsoft on a regular basis. The other reason Microsoft has taken the lead is because it's also the target. They're after your Microsoft credentials.
And it was interesting to see. So, I mean, I want to click on that Amazon link. I could use a 50% coupon, but these brand name impersonations interact with the user in a way that the user would normally trust. So I would expect to get an email from Amazon. I would expect to maybe log into my Amazon account. And it's amazing when you think about the detail, not only your credit card information, but your purchase history, addresses, et cetera, that are the keys to the kingdom within the Amazon environment.
So in the phishing report, we actually go through quite a number of phishing indicators, but I chose 3 here just to kind of give you an example of why these indicators are important, why they matter. So at one end of the spectrum, you have emails that contain a Google Drive link. Now you'll see that only 3% of the phishing attacks contained a Google Drive link. Basically what this means is that 97% of the time, if an email contains that link, it's perfectly legitimate. So there's no way you can automatically trust Google links because they might be phishing, but you also can't arbitrarily block. At the other end of the spectrum are those indicators like a crypto wallet address, where 98% of the time, if an email contained a Bitcoin address, it was malicious. In between those two extremes are most of the other indicators, those that are not clearly one way or another. And most typically, a good example is the WordPress site. Over a third of the internet is built on WordPress. Every small business, gas station, laundromat probably has a WordPress site. It's also possible that they have a compromised page on that WordPress site, which is why 35% of the time, if a phishing attack, if a email contains a link to a WordPress site, chances are it is phishing. So these indicators are used to score above and beyond what the original email filters use, but a combination of indicators are a way to determine what is malicious and what is clean. So now that we've analyzed phishing, we analyzed the categories and different ways that they might enter your inbox. What I'd like to do is talk about the different types of security that you might use to protect against phishing.
So why don't you explain each of these areas, Michael, and then we'll launch a quick poll to see what our users are doing, what our audience is doing.
So most everyone is using the default security, Gmail, Office 365. So every email is being scanned by the built-in technology. Now, you might add to that one of two ways. You might add an external secure email gateway so that all inbound email is scanned before it gets to the default security. Or if you're using Office 365, you actually might purchase their advanced threat protection so that every email not only goes through the default security, but it also gets scanned by Microsoft sandboxing, by additional threat tools. It's also possible that you've installed an endpoint agent or you've trained your users. But there's a category here that you may be new to everyone here, and that is post-delivery protection. And that is a technology that allows you to not only protect inbound email, but also internal email or emails that have made it through all those filters, but now has found to be malicious after the fact. So the ability to actually block an email from inside the cloud or retract an email that already let through.
Now we're going to give you a little more information about what Gartner and some of the other analysts are saying about those different angles of cloud email security protection. But first, I'd like to take another poll. This poll is meant to be interesting so we could interact with you all and sort of understand what people find most interesting. We'll craft our comments and the Q&A based on that. So some sort of secure email gateway, something on the front end that that is pre-cloud, that's outside the cloud, kind of more of a conventional solution. Either the default security or the advanced securities, which would be Office or Gmail normally. Some sort of post-delivery protection, which is a new genre that Michael's talked a little bit more about, an endpoint agent, user training, or something else entirely. So please go ahead and vote now. I'll leave the poll open for a few more seconds before sharing the results. And it looks like a lot of people are doing user training. I'm going to close the poll, 5 more seconds. Get your votes in now. You could vote multiple times, vote early, vote often, and we'll share the results. So user training winning by a landslide. It's rather interesting to see. It's been proven that the effectiveness of user training declines over time, but I guess it's an important base level of of protection for organizations to have.
Absolutely. It is the ultimate last line of defense. And one thing that I do like to see here is that, there are people that are using post-delivery protection. That's a new technology that we think is valuable. But people are using multiple layers. So yes, they have an external gateway. They're using advanced threat protection, and then also involving their users in that full multi-layer defense.
So why don't we see a little bit more about what Gartner and some of the other analysts are talking about, what an ideal solution would look like?
So we're at a transition point when it comes to email security. We've moved from the data center into the cloud. We've moved our email security from the data center into the cloud. But now that we are using G Suite or using Office 365, we actually have more tools at our disposal than we did when we were in the data center. It also means that we're in a new stage in which attacks are different and require more security than ever before. Gartner has published its Fighting Phishing 2020 report, and is essentially a review of all of these different types of security methods and why we need to analyze our use of some of them and maybe introduce the use of others. So secure email gateways are the traditional method to protect email, typically inbound email. And Gartner still always recommends having that additional layer of security. However, those external email gateways only protect inbound and don't have the post-delivery detection and remediation techniques that you're required in the cloud. Another concern when moving your email to the cloud is the default security. And to date, most solution providers have assumed that filtering is catching and will continue to catch all phishing messages, but you should not make that assumption. It is a very dangerous assumption to make, that while default security is important, and we commend both G Suite and Office 365 to ever improving their security, it is not the only solution, and it should not be the only solution. In fact, advanced threat protection is Microsoft's own additional layer of defense. However, what we found is that kind of in the same way that Microsoft's share of the desktop market or the software market increases it as a target, as Microsoft's secure email gateway market increases, it's actually become a much larger target. And this is where we're seeing those pinhole attacks of Microsoft's advanced threat protection. So this new category of protection is something that Gartner is very interested in, and that is the ability to protect against internal attacks, because phishing attackers are infiltrating email systems with account takeover or exploiting access to phish employees or business partners using legitimate email accounts. And because they're legitimate, it's a much harder problem to solve. It cannot be solved with an external gateway, and many times the only way to protect internal email is with this post-delivery protection. We saw in the different categories that while about half of all emails are targeting the endpoint, trying to install some sort of malware on the endpoint, you should still have some sort of endpoint protection. However, there is no technological solution on the desktop to protect against phishing attacks, typically because that desktop does not have the global information necessary, the organizational information necessary to intelligently read an email and understand that it might be a BEC or other sort of social attack. And I commend all of you for including user training as part of your defense system. And Gartner can't stress this enough, is that not only do you need to train your emails, you need to integrate your employees into the solution itself to build capabilities and to respond to suspect attacks. This is where the help desk comes in. So it's one thing to train your user to be suspicious, but more importantly, to provide some sort of feedback loop saying, I don't trust this email. Here's something that's in my inbox. Should this be trusted? Basically feeding a feedback loop either through your help desk or through some sort of software to detect attacks that ultimately only a human can filter.
Now, it's interesting. We've added a lot of information that we've seen from some of the Gartner research. Now, obviously, this is a good connection, good segue to our participation in the Gartner Risk and Security and Risk Management Summit that's next month in National Harbor, Maryland. So my colleague here, Michael, will be speaking at the summit. In addition, the Avanan team will be participating there and hope to interact with as many of you as possible. Again, stay on through the question and answer period and feel free to raise your hand now so that we could indicate those people who are interested in making it to the event.
So before we get to the Q&A, I'd like to spend 30 seconds, short advertisement about Avanan. We are a cloud security company focused not only on protecting your cloud, but specifically your cloud email. We have a methodology that uses an API to connect directly to your Office 365 or your G Suite, essentially running as an app. We combine both pre-inbox inline protection, just like a gateway, but also that post-delivery protection, which is the new technology for cloud email. We have a number of industry-leading tools to protect against phishing, including our own SmartPhish, which is an AI trained specifically to catch what Office 365 or G Suite failed to see. We actually have different engines, one for Office 365, one for G Suite. Those engines tune themselves for your organization. In fact, another engine entirely for internal email because the indicators are different. We also include the user in that AI training so that we do get that full loop conversation to train our AI when the user intelligence discovers the next greatest threat.
Thanks, Michael. So again, post-delivery protection, rather interesting. I hope some of you have found this information interesting and will contact us after the web briefing to learn a little bit more and maybe show you a demonstration of what that post-delivery protection looks like. The ability to not only go into global inboxes all over the world and pull an email out, but actually train the AI on how to look for those types of problems. So we're going to start our question and answer session now. Again, stay on through the question and answer duration, which will only be a few minutes, and we're going to do a live drawing for the winner of our full conference pass at the end of the Q&A panel. Please use the Q&A feature to the right side of your screen or click the Q&A button on the bottom of the screen if that's how your interface looks. It'll pop up the Q&A. We've been collecting questions throughout the duration of the web briefing today, and I've actually queued up a couple of them to answer now that I will, I'll sort of queue them up, Michael. I'll let you start answering them and add anything if I can. So the first question comes in, what's unique about a shortened link and why is that an attack vector as well?
Yeah, so a common attack are the bit.ly type links or the Google shortened link. It has the combination benefit for the attacker. One, you may not trust randomwordsite.com, but you do trust bit.ly, you do trust Google. And many times the email filters will trust that as well. But I think most importantly for the attacker is that it hides a very long, complicated, messy attack vector with a short, easy to click link.
Similarly, we had another question come in that asked about rewriting those URL links. So you talked about URLs and sort of the zero width problem that could be in the URL. This question comes in about some systems rewrite that link. So how does that help protect, or what are the downfalls of that method?
Yeah, so a very common methodology to fight against malicious URLs are smart links. Microsoft calls them, they go by other names, by other email filters, and essentially take every link in every email and then convert it into a smart link so that 5 minutes later or 10 minutes later, you click on it, it actually redirects to Microsoft before it goes to the final location. Basically giving systems that additional 2 minutes or 10 minutes or days to determine if the target of that link is malicious. One of the drawbacks of the smart link system is that it takes the user out of the loop, and in fact causes a user to more likely trust a malicious link because all they see is the word safe link. They see something that someone else has designated to be safe, so they don't need to have that additional 2 seconds of thought to know whether to click on it or not.
The next question comes in, and it's about the use of artificial intelligence that I alluded to. And so I'll start, Michael, and I'll let you add a little bit more color on that. So this question is there a difference in the way the AI looks at Gmail versus Office 365? And another question that came in was, how does the AI in an API tool like Avanan in the cloud compare to what the mail transaction AI is like? So effectively, looking at email after the default security means that we are laser focused on that. So those of you who know anything about AI know that the machine learning gets better based on what it's trained on. So in this case, training the machine learning specifically on the attacks that are missed by Microsoft or Google's default security means that it's just looking for those threads. And then it's also training the AI to look for those similar features and feeding back through the system. Anything to add, Michael?
Yeah, something that we didn't mention in our little ad is that we use multiple third-party tools, sandboxing tools, antivirus tools, URL analysis tools, in order to analyze each email. And not only are we using our own AI to analyze each email, we also have another algorithm that takes the score that Microsoft might give, the score that other third-party tools might give, and weigh them so that even though individually one of them might have let an email go by, collectively they might tip the balance and be found as malicious.
Now this question, thank you, by the way, for whoever submitted the AI question. That was kind of a softball. This one's interesting, Michael. We might be able to help this person who sent in. My organization had an email threat that requested a ransom, and my boss said, "I just never want to see any of these emails ever again." So unfortunately, what do we have to tell this person?
Well, so no matter what security you have, you may see phishing attacks in the future. This is why training is so important. However, there is something to be said about getting those malicious emails out of the inbox. And so if you're under attack, if you see a malicious email, chances are 1,000 of your fellow employees have seen the same email. And when it's detected, if it made it into one inbox, chances are it's in all the others. So this is when we start talking about post-attack forensics. One of the tools that Microsoft offers is their command line PowerShell that allows you to run a batch file, search for a particular subject, for example, and pull things out of the inbox. One of the things that our tool provides is the ability to do that in a click or two, so that if it's a widespread attack, we can reach into every single inbox, simultaneously pull them out, tell the AI about that attack so that the next one is blocked, and then that information go back to our collective training so that now all customers benefit from that training event.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. We had a lot of questions. We have some more questions that came in. We're not going to get to all of them today, but I do want to make sure I get to our drawing. Now, while Michael was taking that last question there, Dylan, who you may have seen, and I are working on the list, and we did a random drawing. Now, I contacted that person over the chat here, and he, in this case, asked not to be named publicly. So we do have a winner. We're very excited to offer that full complimentary pass to the Gartner Summit. Don't be alarmed. We will have another pass available over the next week or two. So pay attention, look at the emails that come across, pay attention to our Twitter and LinkedIn. There will be one more chance for a drawing for a complimentary pass to the Gartner Summit. And again, this is pretty cool because it's your chance to spend 3 or 4 days listening to sort of the best and the brightest in the industry, not only the Gartner analysts, but also other security vendors in the space and a number of organizations really talking about the latest trends in the industry. So with that, I'm very excited that we have a winner. I'm sorry that we can't name them publicly today, but we'll be excited to have them join us next month in National Harbor at the Gartner Security and Risk Management Summit. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. Again, we'll follow up with an email that'll offer the recording. You can get the slides right now, and we'd love to stay in touch via Twitter and LinkedIn and all that stuff. Thank you so much. Thank you very much to my colleague, Michael Landaway.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone.
And we'll speak to you on next month's web briefing.